The default parent doesn't want to spend any time with her son. And so when school is over, the son is put in whatever activity might keep him out of the house and give the mother as much free time as possible. If it's the church choir, the son is signed up for choir. If it's community baseball, the child is signed up for baseball. Whatever is most easily available. If the default parent has enough money, she might put her son in baseball on Monday, choir on Tuesday, music lessons on Wednesday, martial arts on Thursday, and on and on. Her goal, to have as much time free as possible. No concern is it of her what the child might be interested in doing, what his skills might be, what his talents might be, if he's at all ready for the activity. Her goal is to drop him off with a check if needed and leave it up to whatever adult is in charge to take care of her son for her. So, what could happen? Most parents who are going to enroll their son in baseball might spend some time helping the child understand some of the basics of baseball, might take the child to the park a few times to help them get a little bit of practice in before they meet up with the other kids. But the default parent just drops her son off at the baseball field. There's about 10 adults and 10 different groups of kids there. It's noisy. It is a scene of chaos. The son has no idea where to go and is getting more and more anxious. Finally, he walks over to one group that looks like maybe they're the right age for him. And he waits for the adult to be quiet and he says, "Is this the right place for me?" This takes a lot for the child to say, to go up to a strange adult and ask if he's where he belongs. The adult looks at him and he says, "Yes, I called your name 10 minutes ago. Don't be late again." The neglected son of the default parent is now shamed in front of all the other kids. They may giggle. He may feel humiliated. But really, the kids aren't so much blaming him as being really grateful they weren't the last one there. They weren't the one to get reprimanded by the coach. As everybody breaks out into groups to practice skills, it quickly becomes clear that the son doesn't have any yet. And nobody wants to throw the ball back and forth with him because he can never catch it. And no one wants him on their team because he can't hit the ball. The son might, in fact, have talent that could help him become a good baseball player. But because he comes completely unprepared, and at every turn he's faced with feeling anxious, unsure, and humiliated, as the weeks go by, the son becomes more and more concerned as baseball practice gets close. And unlike the other boys on his team, he doesn't come to baseball excited. He doesn't leave happy. Each week becomes worse and worse. Not every default child will respond the same to this situation. Some get more and more anxious. And unfortunately, when you're anxious, you tend to make the most mistakes, which can also lead to more peer rejection. On the other hand, some kids just begin to feel more and more depressed, to think things like, "I am such a loser. I wouldn't want me on my team either. I just hate myself." And some sons might get very angry. And it's not really safe for him to be angry at his mother because she's the one who feeds him and picks him up And if she gets mad at him, she takes a long time to come get him. So he might begin to take his anger out at the people at the baseball field. For example, he might intentionally forget not to throw his bat. And so a member of his team gets hit with his bat. Or when he throws a ball, he might intentionally hit somebody in the knees. The rejection he might receive for this behavior just fuels more and more anger that builds with time. If the son gets one of those coaches who really reaches out to help him, so he begins to develop skills and begins to fit in, baseball might become a haven for this son. But the coach is not paid. The coach is a volunteer. The coach has a lot of kids to keep track of. His task is to teach them how to play baseball. It's not his job to recognize the warning signs of a child who needs emotional support. So it's much more likely that unintentionally the coach will follow the pattern of the default parent of gradually paying less and less attention to the child, unless he's the angry one, in which case he might get punished more and more and spend more time on the bench. If the default parent's son is struggling in school because he's never getting help with his homework, and a teacher reaches out to him, he might get help and find out that he actually can learn if he studies and if he gets help with problems that he finds difficult. And school might become a haven for him. But teachers are there to teach English or to teach math or to teach social studies. They don't have the background to necessarily recognize the warning signs of a child of a default parent. And they have a lot of kids to take care of in each class. And so while some default children will end up having school as a haven, most of them are not recognized. And school becomes one more place where they can feel isolated or humiliated. One thing all these kids have in common, whether they become more and more anxious or depressed or angry, is that they look socially isolated to other people. They're not isolated because they're not interested in being with other kids. They're isolated because they lack the social skills, because they haven't been helped to learn what they need to learn, to make good relationships with kids their age or with other adults like their teachers and their coaches. And because they're often not getting the help they need from other adults in the world, the default child may begin to feel more and more as if most adults are like their parent, treat them as if they're invisible, as if they don't count, as if they're unimportant, and their negative feelings may intensify. As these youngsters enter the teenage years, their parent may feel like, oh, they're old enough to take care of themselves. I don't need to waste my time or my money taking them to activities. So suddenly, finally, if they hate going to baseball practice, they're finally off the team, but it's by default. The default parent isn't finally listening or noticing that their child does not want to go to baseball practice. But now the child and the teen have an awful lot of time on their hands. And what are they doing? The default parent isn't checking their computer or their cell phone or listening in to any of their conversations when they're playing video games with other people online to know what's going on. The default parent doesn't really care what's going on as long as the demands on them are as low as possible. And some of the default children are beginning to self harm. They may be scratching their arms, they may be making little cuts and X's in their ankles There's many different types of physical self-harm. They may be spending a lot of time alone in the dark, listening to depressing music, thinking, I am just a loser. I don't fit in. I don't have a place. Or if they're angry, they might begin to think thoughts about, nobody cares about me. People treat me as if I don't count, as if I'm invisible. It's time for me to show people I count. I'm here. And if the son has turned 18, he may begin to buy guns. He might buy handguns. If he can, he might buy automatic rifles. He might have a knife collection. Different angry children may do different things. He might just be a big bully at school, harming other kids, but not doing something like planning a mass shooting. But there are some default children who do this. They're very angry. They're tired of being treated as if they're invisible. They can't see any way of making a place for them, of being noticed, except doing it with a big bang. We have to stop default parenting. What could you do? If you're one of those parents who has been taking your child to the school bus for years and years and years, and you notice at the bus stop there's a child who's always been alone, even when very young, alone to get onto the bus, alone to get off the bus. If the child looks isolated and lonely, and you speak to them, do they seem to jump? If you ask them a question, do they snap at you? If your child is in the same grade with them and you ask, how's this kid doing? And they say, nobody likes him. Everybody stays away from him. He has a terrible temper. Even the teacher seems to hate him. These are all warning signs of a child who really needs help. It's not your job to know if for sure this child is a victim of a neglectful or abusive parent. But if you see the warning signs, it is your job to contact Child Protective Services. There's one in every county in this country, and tell them the name of this child and, if you know, their address, so that the professionals at Children and Youth Services can investigate to see if this is a child at risk, if this is a child at risk of harming themselves or of harming other people. We must end default parenting. We must recognize just how bad it could be. And if you take action to report some young man because you overhear him muttering comments about how he's just going to shoot everyone at school the next day, call the police. Again, you've noticed a warning sign of danger. It's not your job to be sure the situation is dangerous. It's your job to let the professionals look into the situation. The default teen, the default child, they need our help. Take action.